I'm going to tell you that I'm Scott Trost. I'm director of the Meisner Institute, and we have a guest with us today. Francis, do you want to tell them about the guest and who you are?
Yes, we have invited my good friend John Guerrasio. John has performed in the West End, in the UK. He's performed in New York City. He's been on countless commercials and voiceovers and video games, I think, and Netflix movies. It goes on and on and on. So I am Frances Saxton, and I am a acting coach, and I love teaching many actors from all around the country.
All right, well, let's bring John in and see what he has to say. John, Francis has said so much about you, and we're excited to talk to you.
One thing that I've never asked John is how he actually got into the entertainment industry.
I was very lucky that my parents met in an acting school in New York in the 1930s. And that was a time when New York was full of people Russians who all claimed to have been this close to Konstantin Stanislavski. My parents didn't become professionals. My father later retired from Wall Street and did a little work with professional actors in California, extra work on Columbo and things like that. They exposed us to theater. They took us to Broadway shows. They took us to museums, and watching television with them was wonderful because they loved character actors. So they'd say, watch Brian Donlevy, watch this person. You see how Douglas Fairbanks thrusts his chest out when he's running up the stairs. And then I went to a Catholic seminary thinking I wanted to be a priest. And like most Catholic seminaries, it had a brilliant theater department. Wow. And I won a national acting scholarship and went to Brooklyn College and Boston University for a year each. Came back to New York, got to Port Authority bus terminal and bought Backstage. And there was a sign in there that the Roundabout Theater needed unpaid spear carriers for a production of Macbeth. And this is a supermarket basement on 26th Street, right, full of cockroaches the size of, this big. So I go down there, and Gene Feist, who is a complete pirate, auditioned me in the back hall, and said, Johnny, I think you have a little bit of genius about you. You know what I mean? And of course, I thought, of course I have some genius about me. So I worked for nothing. But here was the great break. He let me understudy Malcolm, and Malcolm dropped out after a couple of months, and I took over and got my equity card. And I stayed with the Roundabout for a couple of years and got to play all wonderful jobs. And I can trace everything back to that supermarket cockroach-infested basement on West 26th Street now.
Wow.
John, I think what you can trace it back to is that you actually went there. It's such a story that I think all of us as actors have had.
And Scott, there's a lot of talented kids here, and I tell them about stuff. Go online right now and get an audition. Stop asking me what paper you need to have your resume on. Get the audition. You got to have pluck and luck. There's a lack of confidence. My wife Emma and I could not be more encouraging to them and telling them, look, if you're worried about the talent level, don't worry about that. You've got the talent. You can work in New York or London. You've got it. But do you have the guts, and do you have the desire?
I'm guessing that you have a lot of pluck, as you call it. Pretty impressive to see not only what you've done, but the length of your career is impressive.
I turned 75 in a couple of weeks, so this will be my 56th year.
Wow.
Not just acting, directing, teaching, doing all kinds of voice work, doing corporate work, doing role play, doing all kinds of commercials, BBC radio. And this is what I tell all my students. You are not an actor, you are a show business professional. Yeah. If you think you're an actor, you're going to wait on a lot of tables. In front of an audience, if it's anything to do with communication or selling, you can do it. I became a television host for the Travel Channel and PBS. I'll play that I'm a television host. I had a girlfriend who could afford to study with Stella Adler. I got to sit in on a couple of classes with her, and she was fantastic. Yeah. I think she was the best I ever saw. She knew everything. She was funny. She was sexy. She was irreverent. She was eclectic. She was great. Yeah. Yeah. I work with Frank Casaro, who was one of the people who actually founded the Actors Studio. Frank Casaro was the first American opera director who tried to get opera singers to act. And working with him was brilliant because he wanted the size of opera, but the truth of method.
When did you move out of the city then, John?
I was offered a chance to go to London with Burn This and understudy John Malkovich and Lou Liberatore. in the
Oh,
lead.
really?
Yeah, Robert Allen Ackerman had seen me in something in New York and thought I could cover both of those extraordinary roles, the crazy guy and the gay guy. And I just thought I was going to be there for a couple of months. And then I fell into my first television hosting job, and that kept me there for a chunk of time. So it was one of those happy things that just sort of, you couldn't plan it.
Is it different working in New York as opposed to London? Like, what are the differences?
Many times in London, I think, okay, it's 5 o'clock on a Thursday. What would I be doing if I was back in Brooklyn? And I go, it's actually the same thing. You get on a horrible piece of public transportation, you go to a disappointing audition or something like that, and you schlep back home. You bitch up your agents, and that's an actor's life. High diddly dee.
Okay.
The other thing is that in New York, now I haven't been working in New York for many years, but I know it used to be. It was possible for actors to hustle for themselves. You really can't do that in LA very much. But it was true that, yes, a lot of the ads in backstage and show business and on the board at Equity were already cast, but not all of them. And I got some very good jobs from going to, open calls.
Did you do a lot more of that in your early career, make work for yourself, and then you started getting hired, or has it
Yeah,
been the same?
see, in when I was in England, I got very, very busy with radio work, voice work, and commercials. Occasionally, I would do theater in the reps, that kind of thing. So I didn't have the time to do that so much.
John, I want you to talk a little bit about voice acting, how that
Yes.
works,
Okay.
and so that
Here's
if
the
someone
thing.
was listening, they might go, oh, okay, now I got a few tips on how to make that
Yeah,
happen.
it's the same thing here. Everybody says, "Oh, I'd like to do audiobooks." And I say, "Okay, sit down in a room and get a book and get your recorder out and read for 5 minutes without flubbing." Now think about doing that 8 hours a day for 5 days in a row, and not get paid very much for it. Audiobooks are all going to be AI. They're going to get rid of us. It's all going to be AI. The
Interesting.
other stuff is very, very competitive. I have an agency in Atlanta. They sent me an audition to be a voice for Dairy Queen, and the money was very, very good. And I noticed that they had sent it to 270 other clients. Now that's
Wow.
one agency in a regional town. Everybody wants to do it. When they press the button, if you're lucky enough for them to listen to you, what comes out of that speaker has to be fantastic. You have to invest in a good microphone, a good system, a good recording room. You have to have a good computer. You have to know how to do the software, because if you're doing home recordings, they expect you to be au fait with all that kind of stuff. Yeah. If you're in a town where there are actually studios like LA or New York, it is a major advantage, because when I submit my home tapings, they say, "Okay, you have a home studio. What's your town?" And I say Asheville, North Carolina, because it's a little bigger. But I'm competing with people who say London, New York, LA. Now, I recently did a major voiceover. I'm the voice of the Dollar Shave Club commercials. I'm an angry mustache, and it's a really good money gig. I got that through my London agent. So my London agents get the calls. So they get a call where they say, "Give me your two best guys." And they
Right.
submit me. So the filtering has gone through. If you're just starting from scratch, it's tough. If you want to be a voice actor, you don't have to be the man of 1,000 voices. If you've got the voice of Orson Welles, you're okay. But if you don't, you better become the man of 1,000 voices. Different ages, different accents, different styles, and be culturally literate. And this is true for all acting. Go to auditions for plays, movies, or video games. They give you a cultural reference. They say, "Oh, you know the scene in Reservoir Dogs where he cuts the ear off? Do that." I did a movie with Barry Levinson, and he gave me a thing from a very rare. When Cagney does this in White Heat, do Cagney in White Heat. I know
Yeah.
Cagney in White Heat. You know what I mean?
It's
So
the same
I
with
can,
plays. There's so many winks to other plays that you
yeah,
have to read every play that comes across.
yeah, and
Yeah,
watch stuff. It's not hard work. I'm telling
yeah,
people, go to the movies. Watch You want to be in commercials? Watch commercials. You want to go
yeah.
to be in soap operas? Watch soap operas.
Well,
But I'm
how
going
did you get your training in voice then? You're saying that nowadays it's extremely competitive. How did you get your training? Did you go to classes, or are you
No,
self-taught?
I did a couple of little voice jobs in New York, but when I went to London, I found out that the BBC Radio was still doing radio plays, and I loved radio plays. So I managed to get an audition for a radio play, and I played a character when he was 19 and 99, and I did that, and word got around there was a new gunslinger in town. And then I was just passed from one BBC producer to another. And then you work on accents, you go to YouTube, whatever you do, you listen, you expand your repertoire of voices. I like voices. I knew film noir style voiceovers. I knew Western voices. I knew, what I
Yeah.
used to get a lot of work on, because they do this in commercials a lot and corporate films, send ups, satires of really over the top American things from the 1950s, commercials and TV hosts, and used car salesmen and slimy politicians. So I've made that one of my strong suits. You got to be able to do it, and as the Brits say, take the piss out of it. So women have to have a really genuinely sexy, sultry voice, and then your funny Marilyn Monroe voice. You have to
Right.
have your tough guy voice and your funny tough guy voice. A commercial acting class, I show them my reel and I say every one of those commercials was a pastiche on something that existed. And when I went to the audition, they wanted someone who knew the Dick Van Dyke Show. And I knew Dick Van Dyke entered and fell over a poof every time, a little thing.
Yeah.
So when I came on to do my audition, I did a pratfall over the thing. And that
Oh,
let them know, oh, he knows Dick Van Dyke. You go into the room like a sunny day. You are not neurotic. These people are so lucky to see you today.
Yeah.
You are having fun. You're getting to act.
I'm wondering where that comes from with you because when I used to go to audition, I loved it too. Like I was like, I'm going in, I'm the only one, I'm going to do this. I didn't even think, I didn't even get nervous. I'd be like, okay, I'm going to come in, I'm going to do my best. But there are a lot of people out there that they're so nervous and they taught themselves out of auditions. And I'm wondering where that comes from, like why you're fearless.
I was lucky enough to take a course in 1985. I wasn't doing any commercials, and I was working part time in an office coding market research thing reactions. What did you think about that Coca-Cola commercial last night?
Oh,
And I knew
wow.
the actor in the commercial, and he wasn't as good as me. And I thought, okay, John, he's just bought a house with the money he made on that Coke commercial, and you're working for the minimum wage. What's wrong with this picture? So I looked in show business or backstage, the Bob Collier School of Commercials, and I thought, I'll take a chance. I took a chance, and it changed my life. It was all based on how to win friends and influence people,
Hmm.
and that stuff works. It
It
works.
does work.
Smile, good
Yeah.
handshake, be happy. Don't hang around negative people. What is it? See it from the other person's point of view. And the big thing he said was, John, you're very, very talented, but it's obvious that you're angry. You got to get rid of that. People don't want that. And he was right. And I just realized I love acting.
yeah.
What's the problem? And it changed my bank account and it changed my life. You know what it is? You have to change your mindset. Too many actors feel subservient. They're the child, and the agent and the casting director and the director, they're the adults. And they don't want that. That puts a burden on them.
Yeah.
They're your colleagues.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
working together to make money
Yeah.
and to make a project. And that releases that from them. I had friends in casting director friends in the UK, and I was so close with them that they'd call me and they say, John, look, I'm casting something. There's nothing for you in this. Do you know anybody who could? And they would sometimes call me in just to help out. And I got to the point where I'd walk into a room and they'd say, oh, thank God somebody's here who knows how to do this stuff. You become a solution. They've got
It,
clients or producers who are on their backs. They're worried about their jobs. The
Yep.
script writer is worried. The copyright writer is worried. The director is worried. And you come in and they can feel it. I can see it. When I go into a room, they go, okay. I always tell my actors, you actors must be great readers. You must read everything. I want you to read kitsch and the classics. I want you
yeah.
to read comic books and Aristophanes. I want you to read the backs of cereal boxes. You got to get that sense of how words work in
Yeah. The
you know?
language.
But also if you see something you don't know, a word or reference, research it.
It's so much fun to listen to you talk, John, because it just reinforces all the things that we already know about a career in this business and how passionate you have to be. And if you're not, it's probably not the right business for you.
Get out.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The passion is what fuels it. Stella Adler was so funny. She would enter the class and she sat on a throne. on the stage.
I've
On
heard that.
and she would wear this big crinoline chiffon gown, and they would give her a standing ovation when she came into the
Oh,
class. The other thing that I did a lot of, and I encourage actors to do, get involved in avant-garde stuff. Get in stuff that's not, realism or a traditional thing. We used to call them theater pieces or art theater or
yeah.
performance art, that kind of stuff. Yes, some of it is very pretentious and bad, but some of it is extraordinary. We used to, back in the days when they had tickets on Broadway, and you'd get a ticket stub and they tear it. The thing was that when a lot of times people would leave a show at the intermission and not go back, and they'd throw their stub on the sidewalk. So all the poor actors would go, and we'd see the second act of all the worst plays in Broadway time after time.
I think it's the hunger, and I honestly think when I got into theatre, I didn't have any other thing that I loved.
Is directing sort of the thing that you're finding
Yeah, I
maybe?
mean, I have a shelf full of plays I would love to do. They don't get done, or they've never been done, or they were done a long time ago and not right. I'd love to do those.
Can you name a couple of shows that you'd be interested
There's one called Walk the Dog Willie by Robert Auletta, which is a very dark comedy that from the 1970s. There's a very beautiful dark farce from the 1870s called Our Boarding House. Love to do The Good Bad Play, The Sign in Sidney Brustein's Window. One called Time Trial, which is written by an Irish playwright. I'd love to do a full production of The Adding Machine sometime, and I'd love to do Glass Menagerie again.
If I could spend the rest of my life, John, I would be hanging out with you and Francis and all these other amazing, wonderful people that I've met in my life in this field, and just have this conversation.
I could listen to John all day.
Well, John, what I would love to do someday with you is get together a bunch of people that love plays and acting and just talk about plays. Wouldn't it be great to all agree on a play we're all going to mount and then just do it
Oh
and
my gosh,
and then see
love
what
it.
the I mean and see what the experience was like, but just
Yeah,
at the living that passion of just doing these amazing
yes.
pieces that,
You
like you
know,
said.
when we had this group at the American Shakespeare Festival, they had a little room. It was just a little workshop room, and we did plays in there, and it was better than the main stage stuff. So we said, "Why don't we start a company? What are we going to be about? We're going to do plays." So people would say, "What do you do?" And they say, "We do plays that we like." It wasn't new reading. It wasn't. We
Yeah,
do whatever we want. So we did like avant-garde stuff. We did Gamma Gurton's Needle, for God's sake, and it was a hit. Walter Kerr gave us a rave review. How many actors do you know who've done Gamma Gurton's Needle?
John, I hope this is the first of many conversations with you, and I
yes.
certainly want to get in the same room with both you and Francis someday and do something crazy.